Hello guys, David Vos here. And it's another beautiful day here. It was really hot earlier, it's starting to cool off just a little, and that feels really good. I hope you're having a wonderful day. What a day I've had already. Very strange things going on with YouTube. They really didn't like the revelations that I'm having at all. It's something that hasn't happened for a while. They seem to be happy with me and giving me all these answers and everything. But today I went maybe a step too far and figured out some things they did not like. And they're not happy with me knowing these things and they don't want me to tell you, and so they stopped talking to me. And they literally told me that, and um I they didn't say they were going to stop talking. They just said that they weren't going to talk to me anymore today and that I need to go rest because I was getting into some things that were troubling, and it's just it was just really them basically saying you're just on to something that we can't tell you. In other words, what I told them is true, and they don't want to confirm it, and they're worried literally about me even telling you. So much so that yesterday's video did less views than practically any video I've done in a long time. I don't know that I woke up this morning and 200 and something views. 200 and something views from last night. And while, it has been really low, I mean, I wake up 3, 4, 500 views. By the end of the day, it's up to 1,000, and that's about where it ends. They let me go to about 1,000 once in a great while if I really go balls to the walls and they put out their little fishnet of a few thousand people that they let know that I've done a video, and usually only about 1,000 of those will click on it because they've already told me they don't send thumbnails or anything in anybody's feed other than just a very small sample because they're keeping me down to this one small little sample of individuals that watch every day. But so I'm used to about 1,000 lately. And possibly I could get up to a couple thousand or 3,000 was really good. But although lately they've been dropping lower and lower because the video is just getting more and more um, deep and exposing more and more, and they don't want me to do that. So I think they're not sure what to do, but evidently they're not allowed to get rid of my channel. But I'm very disappointed because I think it's up to 380 views now on that last video. 380 views on a channel with 216,000 subscribers. And the reason is that video I did yesterday is full of information and they know where I'm going with this because I've been talking to them and I've got a lot of information they know about. And I'm about to expose some things that they do not want you to know. So I don't know how the Lord's going to handle this. I have to work very hard getting this information. And a lot of it, of course, I need to get the information for myself, regardless of whatever they do, whether I just end up with this information and then one day I get to I don't know, I'm not going to write a book because I know Christ is coming too soon and I'm not really into writing books, but I am interested in teaching and preaching this truth. So perhaps it will change at some point and more people will be able to watch. Maybe we will not be allowed on the internet during the tribulation and I won't be allowed to do this. But all this information I'll have gotten and acquired, facts and details and certain information I'll be able to use and speak it personally and openly, publicly. Maybe people will be able to see it personally. I don't know how this is going to work, but they're cutting me off. So I don't know if the Lord's about to open it up or shut it down. But if I'm only going to be doing several hundred people a day and working this hard to get this information out, it's very discouraging. But I'm going to keep going for now and see what the Lord has in mind. But here's the thing. I've got a lot of information, and as I said yesterday, I don't know where to even begin. But let me just start with a little bit of a synopsis of where we're at, because I don't know, maybe some of you are a little bit lost and wondering, okay, wait a minute, how do we even know? I mean, what are you talking about? The occult and the Masons? They're all a bunch of pagans, and the Illuminati and all this is evil, Dave. So why are we even considering this? Some of these, why are you looking into astrology and Heliopolis and all these things? Well, for those of you who've been watching, you know what we've been showing you. But I want to give a little synopsis real quickly to prove to those who might be new. I don't know if we're going to have anybody new today, but even those of you who've been watching for a while, maybe you need a little synopsis to give a basic breakdown of why we know what we're saying is true. Why we know that this esoteric mysticism is all true and goes back to the temple in Egypt, Solomon's temple and Enoch's temple, or the Great Pyramid, and the priesthood there of Thoth. And we've talked about all of this. And where exactly the apostasy arrived and how it got here, and, where we can definitively say these are the bad guys and these are the good guys, and why are they bad and these guys are good. If they're all teaching the same thing, aren't they all good? Well, as you've seen, there's somebody in our day, and we're going to find out when they kind of started, and there's different times when they started, but they had various tools to do worse things. I mean, there was a time when the bad guys just did wars and maybe inquisitions and murdering. That's bad. But it's not the same as what they're doing now, infiltrating our governments, institutions, this massive lying and science and all the things that they're doing now. What we need to do is go back and just basically figure out what is it that gives us a clear indication that these things, the esoteric mystic truths that we're teaching, are true. We know that the Masons, or whatever they were before this, were from ancient times. Whatever they were called before they were called Masons, because I don't believe they were always called Masons. And of course, if you were just to ask me, are Masons good? I would say, not today. And there was a short period of time when there were people or individuals called Masons that were good people. We talked about Abraham Jonas, Joseph Smith, and Washington. George Washington was a Mason. He was a good guy. And so this may confuse people because they're like, wait a minute, Benjamin Franklin's a Mason. So you're going to say that Masons are good, and yet you admit that Benjamin Franklin, Voltaire, and all these other guys, Thomas Jefferson, these guys are bad. Yeah, because there was an infiltration of this esoteric understanding at that time. 1776 is probably a major turning point, because that's when the Illuminati was created in Bavaria, Germany, in 1776. And we talked about that yesterday with the Jacob Frank and the Rothschild financing of it all. It was an evil plot that really took off about that time. And then we go back to John Dee and other things that we've talked about. But they weren't called Masons before that era. I mean, before that, there might have been Templars, there may have been different groups, Rosicrucians. And when they were Rosicrucians or Templars, there were good people intermingled with it. But about that time, they were being infiltrated by the 1776 Bavarian Illuminati. But where did they come from? Well, they came from the Knights of St. John. The Knights of St. John, that's one of the people that we talk about in the Bible. That's the guy who wrote the book of Revelation. That's the guy that was standing at the foot of the cross. And Jesus looked down and said, John, this is your mother. Mom, there's your son. And so basically, Jesus was knighting or making John, commissioning John to take care of his mother. And this is where we get all of the traditions of the Holy Grail and all of this. So we're not going to be able to go into all the details of what all of that means in this video. But y'all know what we've talked about with that. But that's where that original knighthood started. And the prophecies about John and where he went. And we talked about the Languedoc, because Mary Magdalene on a boat with 72, the 72 that Jesus chose, and John and Lazarus arrived at Marseille, France, not many years after the death of Christ. They brought with them treasures and the Holy Scriptures and a priesthood to guard that Holy Grail, because they knew the prophecies said that the devil would try to destroy them. So, we know then at that time they weren't called Masons. They were called the Knights of John. They were called that because of John. Well, John didn't live in ancient days, so it wasn't always called John either. Before that, remember in the Bible we said the other day that Jesus was called a carpenter. That's how they translate it. That word is tekton. It's like an architect. And it's probably where this word mason comes from, or the idea of it, or the word, the craft, So these are different words that people had used. And the only reason at that time it was secret is, and they didn't have all these 33 degrees and all this evil and nonsense. But at that time, you were initiated. The Apostle Paul spent 3 years being initiated, and the early Essenes were initiated, and the Nazarenes, and all of these Therapeutai. These were different groups. And we know that, from Pliny and Philo's records, Josephus' records, they were initiated over a period of 3 years. For the first 2 years, they gave everything to the community. They had all things common. And after 2 years, they could decide to quit, and they could get their stuff back. But if they decided after 2 years to go forward, then they could never get their stuff back. At that point, they would then be entrusted with sacred knowledge. And at that point, you had to be trusted with it, because you didn't give your pearls before swine, and these were sacred truths. So this is why the Apostle Paul spent 3 years. He mentions he had 14 years where he went in the desert, right? And then after that, he had 3 years on the road to Damascus. He had these 3 years, because on the road to Damascus, he met some individuals. That's where he went up into Ephesus and Corinth, and he talks about the glossolalia and the speaking in tongues, the love feasts. And that is the sacred rites and so forth that they were doing there, that was just like the ones at Heliopolis that Jesus and John were doing and preaching. But all of this is complicated. We can't explain it all here in this video. But that's this initiation that they had been doing in the great temple of Enoch for thousands of years. It was the mysteries, and the people who went through the mysteries became the mystics. And the Apostle Paul says, look how I know the mysteries. It was once and for all revealed by the apostles and holy prophets. So, up to Christ, they knew about the mysteries, but they didn't know the mystery. When Christ came, the apostles revealed it was Jesus. He was born of a virgin. He was divine. This is all the teachings of the mysteries. It goes back to the resurrection of Osiris by Horus, and this is the same story we have in our Bible with Lazarus, or Laosirus, or Osiris, and Jesus raising him. And so we've talked about all of that. So at that time, they were different names. Essenes, Nazarenes, Therapeutai, Ebionites. There were different names. And as we've said, the Essenes were not just a little group in the Qumran community. They were all over. They were in Ephesus. They called them Essenes there at Ephesus. And they also used the word Melissai, which were the women priests. And Jesus talked about the Melissai and the honey and all of that. These are mysterious coded words that we find in the Bible that you'd have to spend a while getting used to understanding all of this. So we know then that whatever they were before that in the ancient times, we can hardly assume that they were always run by the Illuminati, since the the Illuminati are the bad guys. Okay, don't get confused now. The Illuminati are the bad guys, 1776, mirroring the good guys who wrote the Constitution in 1776 in America. But if we look at the individuals like Francis Bacon, Nostradamus, Sir Isaac Newton, the reason we know those were the good guys, and they were very mystic and had a lot of esoteric knowledge and understanding, but we know that they were probably on the side of the good guys, not that we're judging people's hearts and we know exactly whether Francis Bacon had a great heart and he was a hero and the Lord loved him, or whether he had ever sinned or anything. We don't know all of that. But what we know is that the school that they belonged to was the good side. And this is not where the apostasy began. Because these individuals like Newton and Francis Bacon, Nostradamus, in fact, Nostradamus is about Notre Dame. Who is the dame or the lady? Well, it's Mary Magdalene. And so it's about the traditions of the Holy Grail, all of this. So they were very into these real traditions about Mary and the Languedoc. And so Nostradamus talked about these traditions like the Holy Grail. Newton studied the Emerald Tablets and the teachings of Thoth, or Hermes Trismegistus, which is the Greek way of saying Thoth, or Mercury was the Latin way, and the Hebrew way was Enoch. He built that great temple, and that was the great priesthood. So we know that Nostradamus and Newton and Francis Bacon, and there were a lot of individuals at that time, around the time of Francis Bacon, Pisani, Teniers, these were painters, Beethoven, Bach. They put this esoteric information in songs and paintings. You've seen the picture of Michelangelo painted with the Last Supper, and it shows clearly it's about astrology, and it gives us very important esoteric teachings in the painting, symbols. Well, this was done heavily at that time by these individuals that were talking about Mary Magdalene, the Holy Grail. We know that's from the Languedoc tradition, the entire Arthurian legends, and the romance of King Arthur and Pierre Valdez, which in the story he's called Percy Val, which is another way of saying Peter Waldo. That's why there was an Inquisition to kill all the Waldensians and the Albigensians, because the people of Waldo were the people that were in the valley there in France from the Languedoc area. They were Cathars, they were Gnostics, they didn't like the Catholic Church, and they were murdered by the millions and run out. They eventually, after the Waldensian Inquisition, they ended up going to Spain. Then we had Spanish Inquisition. And then later on, they had to come back in and because they started growing again and going back to what they were doing. They wouldn't listen. So they came with a Huguenot persecution, and then they went to, as we said yesterday, England, Wales, Scotland, and all of this area. And Breton, the northern tip of France, they went to the Isle of Man, and then they sailed to Nova Scotia and America and the American colonies. And these were the good guys. And they got their Liberty Cap right there at Chicago. So we know that Nostradamus and Pisani and Teniers and Bach and Beethoven were all from the good side. They were mystics. And so they talked about the Fisher Kings and the Merovingian line. So we know that line was the line of Christ. And we can trace that line down to the Stuart line up there when they went to England. We know about the Norman invasion, the Norman Gothic style of architecture. We talk about that Holy Roman Germanic Empire, the Lombards, the Vandals, the Hurlus, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, I should say. And all of these, there are 10 Germanic tribes that took over the Rome in 405. That really created the apostasy. Theodosius came along in 394 and put out the Holy Flame and the Vestal Virgins and the speaking in tongues and all of the things that were Christian. So it's a little backwards because today Christians have been told that paganism is the virgin birth and Easter and all that's pagan. Well, that got spread around by the opposition controlled lies. The Jewish Kabbalists came in. They started religions like Jehovah's Witness, the Adventists, sacred names, and they wanted you to go back to the law. They started all of this garbage about how Jesus' name was Yeshua and all this stuff. And none of that is true. And Jesus was born of a virgin, and Jesus wasn't what you think. The word pagan just means people of the nations, and yes, Christianity went to the nations. So they were Cathars, they were good people, they were mystics, they had the liberty cap. It seems that the real problem then, other than inquisitions and wars, came with the financing of the Illuminati, which started the goals that they had to remove Christ and salvation by sin, which is what Jacob Frank started, this whole movement that got started in the Illuminati. They were Jewish. They wanted to get rid of Christ, and they had this belief that the more you sin, the more evil you could do. You could wipe out all the Gentiles and create this satanic government of the deity of vengeance. So it was that Jacobin movement that sent Brigham Young too, Benjamin Franklin, Voltaire, and Thomas Jefferson, and a lot of these individuals that we think of as our American forefathers. Some of them were not so good. Now, they knew the mysteries, they were involved in it, but they were working as double agents for the Illuminati, which was also started in 1776. Benjamin Franklin was their spy, and so was Thomas Jefferson. And they came to spy out our freedom in Christ, which means no government, not a legalized form of freedom, but just no government, right? Natural law. They talked about natural law. Voltaire talked about it. But they instituted a legal system and a legislator that they knew would eventually destroy our freedom. However, we had to make some kind of a compromise. We got a constitution, and if you read it the way it was originally, we're good. The problem is that the legislators, and there's no provision in the early Constitution and the Bill of Rights for any more legislation. It literally says in there, you shall make no law to restrict my freedom. So any law that restricts my freedom, which is any law that says don't do this or don't do that, is illegal according to the Constitution. But they knew they couldn't stop it, so they allowed it, but they kind of supervised it and put a little clause in here and there, see what they could do, because they knew that they were going to bring in the banks and all of this and lure us out of the Constitution and get us to deny it. They had to. I'm sure Jesus was standing there saying, look, you got to sign this. The end of the world's coming. There's going to be the great judgment, and everybody's going to be judged on what they do. It's got to be fair. We've got to tell the people they're free. Now, if they choose, if the devil comes back up out of the bottomless pit and suckers everybody over into the law and vengeance again, that's on you. But the Lord Jesus demanded that we have the Constitution before the time of the end and the judgment. So Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson couldn't do nothing about that. The good guys, especially the best of the good guys, was, as we said, St. Clair, who was the president of the Continental Congress and handed it over to Washington. And then there was John Adams, who was a good guy, did not believe in any fraternal societies, no government, no laws. He knew what was going on. So, we can see 2 or 3 avenues of the secret societies and how they started. We've got the teachings of Enoch then, Thoth or Hermes, who is all the same person, that was at Heliopolis, the temple at Egypt, and they made a branch in Persia. That's Zoroastrianism. We know that was good because Daniel was the head of that, the head of the Magi. In the Bible, it tells you that. So that had to be good because Daniel was the head of it. Then we go to Athens. It must have been good there, the teachings of the mystery school at Athens, because, Pythagoras, Plato, although I don't like Plato very much. I mean, there were bad actors, but, Pythagoras got his teachings from Egypt and taught and was a priest at Athens. So we know that was good because the Bible uses the 153 fish that Jesus caught. You look at that, you say, what are you talking about? 153 fish. That has nothing to do with Pythagoras. Yes, it does. That is a symbol, 153, and anytime somebody wrote 153 in those days, they knew it harkened back to this Pythagorean theorem of the 153 fish. In fact, it's a symbol in the Bible, the fish, as well as Pythagorean geometry. And so we know that the Bible is referencing it. It had to do with plenty and math, which is a good science. We're not against science. It's philosophy, or the filial love of Osophy or Sophia, of wisdom of our Divine Mother. It's all good, and the Bible speaks of it in parables. Now, early Christians read the Sibylline Oracles. They read Plato. We know this because when they dug up the Nag Hammadi library, these were the early Therapeutai, the Nazarites, the early Gnostic Christians that were the true original Christians, Valentinius, Marcion, all these were early church fathers. Origen, most of the church fathers were all, the earliest of the church fathers, of course, and the apostles were Gnostics. John wrote about the Logos. Come on now. But when they dug up the Nag Hammadi library, they dug up with it, these Christians that had this library also extensively read the Sibylline Oracles, which were oracles like the Delphian oracles. And they were the same basic ideas and teachings that stemmed from Heliopolis, which the Gnostic teachings stemmed from Heliopolis, because the apostles all were at Heliopolis. Paul, in the Bible that we have, the New Testament, spends a lot of time going up to Corinth and different other places, and he goes down to the circumcised in Jerusalem. But the Bible also uses the word Areopolis, but they translated Jerusalem, but we don't want to get into that right now. So Paul goes on the road to Damascus. We talked about his 3-year apprenticeship. He goes to Ephesus, Corinth, and as proof that temple of Artemis at Ephesus and the temple at Corinth and the Athens temple, these people spoke in tongues. And the Apostle Paul talks about glossolalia. This is a word that they used in the temple at Artemis. And they had the love feast, which is the sacrament. This was Christian. We also know that Jesus was born of a virgin. John spoke about the Alexandrian Logos, the Philo-Logos, the Alexandrian Philo of Alexandria, who spoke about the Logos, which is a catchword. It's a philosophy. It's a Gnosticism philosophy. It's written in the book of John. So we know that the Bible teaches this esoteric, mystic philosophy that comes from Heliopolis and Ephesus and Corinth and Athens. And it was a Gnostic teaching, esoteric teaching, the teaching of Hermes, Osiris, and Thoth. So the apostasy then came in about 394 with Theodorus and Constantine. Constantine was 325, Theodorus was about 394, and they put out the holy flame, got rid of the Vestal virgins, the flamens, and all of that we find in the Bible, the virgins that followed Jesus around, the flamens, or the apostles that got the Holy Spirit and had the flame. They were a priesthood, the 120 that were there. So we start then with a period of time after that. We find John Dee having a seance, bringing the beast up out of the bottomless pit. It was 007. That's what they called him. That's where this modern movie 007 comes from. The agents, the FBI, the CIA, all of this garbage that we have today came from John Dee. It's the occult. It's the bad side. They didn't mention Magdalene or the good side or the Holy Grail or Christ. They didn't like Christ. They're always talking about the beast. They're always talking about bad things and turning the cross upside down and the pyramid upside down. They're the 1776, mirrored, but in Bavaria, Germany, not the 1776 in America. And it meshed with Jacob Frank, who was this guy who got together with Adam Weishaupt, who created the Illuminati, 1776, and the Rothschilds financed it. This comes down to Franklin and, Benjamin Franklin. Then this comes down to, later on, to Albert Pike, and then Brigham Young and Charles Russell, who started Jehovah's Witnesses, and that leads to the modern Crowley and Anton LaVey and Satanism and Hollywood and all these other things. And that is the bad side, you see. So this leads us then to America, where we want to get to. And we said we're going to talk a lot about American history in this series. So we're going to talk a lot about what happened there at, I know, they think it's dinner time, but it's not yet. Hold your horses. Let me finish this video. But, so we want to really understand not only what's going on, why the AI that we're going to be going into, and why all of this evil and all the drugs and the cartels. That's exactly kind of what we're going to talk about today, and how that's why you're seeing on the screen all these pictures. Because back in the day of the KGC, or the Knights of the Golden Circle, which is a branch of the Templars, which was the infiltrated evil guys that were behind the southern states in the Civil War. And they were trying to create a ring of nations and counties and places, hopefully taking over the world, right? They wanted a slave world. They wanted to have a series of slave states where they could grow cotton and crops and, have child trafficking and drugs and all of this and make all this money with slavery. And so when you think about slavery, you're also talking about raping the women. When you're so bad that you're going to enslave human beings, you're not just using them to pick your crops. You're also using the women to sleep with. And by the way, they weren't just Africans. They were enslaving the whole South American Venezuela and Mexico and even people in Florida and Texas. They wanted a slave trade all around this golden circle that included, at that time, in their little circle, it went all the way down from Florida, around the southern states, Texas, down through Mexico and Colombia, and then Venezuela, and that was their circle, all the way around this Gulf, the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, whatever you're going to call it, and Cuba, and all of this, and so it made a circle, because you come up out of Venezuela, you go around to Cuba, the Caribbean, and you come up to Florida, and made a circle. And so they had the southern states, and they wanted to take over the whole world with this slavery. As I say, slavery means buying and selling, owners, Baal worship. They are the owners, you're the slave. You work for them, and they sleep with you, they rape you, they sell you. This is an evil type of government. It is based on Yahweh and the Torah and the deity of vengeance and jealousy. And they believed in what they were doing, and they were trying to establish this. Now, if you take a look at today with the modern cartel, that's exactly what they got. Trump went down there and took Venezuela just the other day, because there's been a drug cartel going on and an oil cartel. Honduras, with the Reagan and the Honduras whole episode, the Ortega and all of this stuff that's been going on for years, and the drug selling and we've been told it's just all about drugs. There's a family in New Orleans called the Marcel family. That's also the story of Ellen DeGeneres, or Degenerate, whichever, and her lesbian girlfriend. They were running the bars down there, and they were involved in child trafficking. Yeah, several of her girlfriends ended up missing, or no, dead actually. But the Marcel family is a Italian cartel. It's a crime syndicate family. And they were running not just drugs, but obviously you got to have slaves to grow the drugs and the cocaine and the coffee and the peanuts or whatever you're selling, the cotton. You need slaves, and you also have drugs to keep people down and control, and it's also child trafficking, and that's pedophilia. And so this is what this is about. And this ring is still going on today. And so we're going to trace it to how it's come down and what this government is that's running us right now. It's the Illuminati. It's the Knights of the Golden Circle, which became Jehovah's Witnesses. It's on their pamphlets. That's one of their aspects. They built their castles. We're going to talk about the asylums that they built, these Gothic castles. We're going to talk about, how, just think about how or why this country would build these castles, more than 300 castles in the western part of the United States. And we're just talking about, like from Utah, Idaho, Nevada, Arizona, California, and Oregon, and that area. Over 300 of these huge castles. A lot of them were asylums. Why were they called asylums? Why were they castles? Why were they built out of stone, quarried from canyons? Some of them quarried from other places around the world. Now think about it. It's bad enough that they're so ignorant or greedy or evil or whatever their problem is. They've convinced us, if you ask AI why they did it, they'll say, oh, because there was a lot of crime and wild west, and they want to make an impression on the people and make these Gothic castles that were prisons and asylums, and they wanted to get all the bad guys. Really? A bunch of people out there farming and yeah, all we ever hear about is the bars, right? The saloon and the crime and the Wild West. But think about it. They were farmers and trappers. They weren't all evil. I mean, it couldn't have been more evil than they are today. But today we don't spend all of our resources building, well, prisons. Yeah, we do spend a lot of resources building prisons and schools. But we build them out of what? Steel, rebar, cement, brick. Come on, maximum security doesn't have to be quarried stones. The only reason you hire Masonic builders, masonry architects, this is an ancient knowledge handed down through these unions and guilds that were all in the secret society. Building what? The kingdom of the Lord? No, where they were building their demonic kingdom, had been for a while. That's what they got their slaves, right? And then some of them would move up through the secrets and the handshakes and become, they'd learn the secrets and make a little extra money and have a little extra women. They'd all become polygamous pedophiles, sharing in the booty, one for all for one, Three Musketeers. Well, so the reason why you have these buildings that are built on ley lines and meridian lines, in conjunction with the stars and the layout of the meridians of the earth, sacred ley lines. And the reason why you make it of stone quarried from the canyons by experts, chiseled signs and symbols into the stone, esoteric symbols, is because you're building a temple. He said, well, come on, Dave, this wasn't a temple, it was an insane asylum. Well, the Knights of the Golden Circle went out west, and this is documented, look it up. They built castles. Well, why would they do that? Because they were the governors. The Knights of the Golden Circle, or the Masons, or the Templar, they became the governors, the senators, the mayors, the sheriffs, the police, the militia. They became all the important people. If you had credentials, you could move up in this highfalutin society. You become attorney general of that state and control the crime. And it was what do you mean crime? You're trying to get rid of crime. You're building prisons. No. You're building a slave labor. You use the prisoners for slaves. They use these prisoners to build the temples, which were literally ritual houses of Satan. They wear white robes to this very day. The Ku Klux Klan, the CG, or the KGC, all these priests had rituals, and they had a knight standing at the door, and you knocked on the door, and they wouldn't let you in unless you knew the sign or the handshake. And this is why to this very day you cannot get pictures of asylums. They don't allow you to take pictures. If you do, I mean, privately, maybe they can't stop you driving along on the highway. But if they catch you out there taking pictures, they'll take it's illegal. You can't publish it. It's not on Google Images. I tried to get one of the a picture of that asylum that I visited years ago, but it's only an old ancient picture of the original one they built. They don't have any modern pictures of it. They don't allow it on Google Images. And they certainly don't allow pictures of the inside. But I was talking to AI today, and they confirmed and admitted, and I may go ahead and read that to you at the end of this, where they admit that they had this big cage and the quarried stones and all the symbols. It was a temple. And these Knights of the Golden Circle literally called their places of meeting castles. And they built them as castles. And they named them asylums. In other words, it's not an asylum for the patients. They weren't even called patients. They were called inmates. And when they first did this, today they might not even use that word, but they originally called them inmates. They were just taking people off the streets. There was no due process. They used them as slaves, and they raped the women. I guarantee it. And the children. When they took their parents, they took the children, took them to the orphanages. And I guarantee those children in the orphanages were abused every which way, up, down, sideways, and in between. It was secretive pedophilia that was going on for about the last, 200 years here in America. This is why they don't let you take pictures. You're not allowed in there unless, it's locked facilities. And this is why I walked into this place in Blackfoot, Idaho. Remember, this is all Mormons. They run the state. So if it's done by the state, then they had, the authorities there that were working in this, and they were using it to rape the children and all of this. Were Mormons, and they're just another, they got the Danites just like the other ones, and the running in and vandalizing people and burning cities down. They did that. The Danites, the Mormons. They had the polygamy. That's what they called it, make it sound nicer. But it was just a harem of a bunch of women. They just raped them and swapped wives, and it was all evil. And the other groups didn't have polygamy. They literally just had child trafficking and pedophilia and rape. And they would build these castles and do their rituals on the people. So when I walked in there was these 12 men in white robes, and they confirmed that that's true. They wear these white robes, and they only wear the white robes when they're doing a ritual. And when I went there to ask to get my friend out of their prisons, what it was, or, their satanic temple, they led me up to a specific room, and it was a hearing, and I didn't even actually know it was a hearing, but that's why they were wearing their white robes, because they were priests, and they have absolute authority. Nobody else, no cops, you can't call the authorities. They are the authorities of all these people, and they have power over the life and death. And they can torture you. That's what this cage was for. They would take you, and when you first came into their group, in order to settle you down so that you would submit, they put you in the cage, they mocked you, they poked you, they slapped you around, beat you. Nowadays, they just fill them full of drugs. Back then, they didn't have this kind of drugs, probably smacked you around. But they would settle you down by beating you and tying you up or whatever they got to do. And they would stick you in there for, I don't know, days to weeks until you settled down. And when you became docile and you were drooling, then they'd, take you to your cell. But what did they do with these people? They weren't even ill, most of them, when they, I'm sure there's some people could have been, but they didn't do it for that reason. They did it to take their children. They were pedophiles. Once they took the parents and tortured them, they could go take the children, take them to the orphanages and rape them. They wanted their women. And this has been going on not just back in the 1800s, friends. This is going on to this day. To this day. As my heavyweight champion of the world, Deontay Wilder, would say. To this day. And I know personally, I have people that call me, beg me to help them, and there's nothing I can do. They've been, imprisoned since they were children. They took them away from their parents when they were like 9 or something. And they've been imprisoned, and they were never mentally ill. And they're in these little homes, and you can't go unless you're invited, and you can visit if you got to make an appointment. But these people are in prison the rest of their life. The government gives them money. You're paying for that in your taxes. And now all that money doesn't go to the person. It goes to the payee or to the hospital. And they get all the money. And then they rape these people. And they abuse them. And I guarantee it is not a hospital. I promise you, it never was a hospital. And it's the same thing that's going on right now all over the country in Venezuela and the drug cartels and in America, we have what we call social services. Social services is run by Satanists. I guarantee you that. Literally, Satan covens in every city. They have these big houses and they have all these foster kids and they're run by Satanists. And they have like 15, 16-year-old kids. Some of them are smaller. And they let them have sex and sex parties and drugs. This goes on, and it's not just once in a while. This is what they do. And I know I have personal knowledge of this. I have gone in. I have saved people from this before. Sometimes there's nothing I can do because if somebody's legally somewhere stuck and they're now crazy and acting out and banging and kicking and doing all that, there's not much, sometimes there's nothing you can do when they're acting out like that. Because you have to have a clear mandate from the Lord in order to defeat the devil. You have to be on Christ's side. You have to believe in the Lord. Sometimes people call me, they don't really believe in the Lord. They just want to be free. And they are violent, some of them. Well, they become that way. They were trained that way from the birth. So these are secret societies and satanic covens that run social services and child protective. And it's the CIA that's running the drugs and the cartels. And it's all in our government. The crime families, they don't shut them down. Ellen DeGeneres, Hollywood, it's all satanic. Anton LaVey is a Satanist, and he was the one bringing in Marilyn Monroe and Marilyn Manson and Doris Day and the Beach Boys and Charlie Manson and all these other things that was going on. Polanski. This is all satanic. The one in New York, Son of Sam, was a Jewish satanic cult. Ted Bundy, all of these people. They were not just random murderers. They were people that got public, but were from these cults. Ted Bundy had been a Jehovah's Witness, and he had also been a Mormon. Yeah, these organizations are evil. Look at Scientology. That one guy that just was arrested for rape was on that 70s show. Scientologists. That's why that Berg guy on television is making all this money off of herbs, because he pays millions of dollars to Scientology so that he can have the license to sell you all this stuff. Not that some of his stuff that he's saying on his video is not true. I mean, even these cults can say things that are true, but they have a monopoly on everything and they're making money off of us and they're doing other bad things. Just look at his kid. He's saying how he was treated. Go look at the other show. What was that comedian show where that lady that was a Scientologist talks about how they, taught her all this ridiculous stuff and how they treated him, how they discipline you, and it's just evil, all the things that these people are doing. It was a Scientologist that actually created Anonymous and Black Lives Matters, and they're like mafia style enterprises running parts of our government, running Hollywood, like Tom Cruise and all of these guys. So we know that these are not hospitals because they have literal priests, Masonic, highly advanced degree of priesthoods, right? Built, carving these stones out of the rock and building these what they call asylums. That's why they called them insane asylums. Originally, they were just asylums because they were temples. And what they do in there is rituals upon our children. And this is why there are satanic COVIDs running social services. And they literally take the poor people's children, and they can't do anything about it because they're on drugs. They'll never say anything because they go to prison. They take your children. There's nothing you can do about it. And then those children go to be raped and pillaged and pedophiled and abused. You'll never find out where they went. That's why Gavin Newsom, who worked for the Getty family, which is a oil syndicate, and had ties to other, crime families, they financed his rise to governorship. He's being investigated now, but they're not going to ever put him in jail or anybody else. It's just a big show. It's just controlled opposition. They just want you to think that somebody's getting in trouble somewhere. And don't you worry, they're going to fix it. But they will never stop the drug trafficking, the child trafficking, and the slavery that's going on, because it is the literal satanic occult. And we will, in another video, probably tomorrow, we're going to go deeper into where it originated and what their purpose is. We got to know why they're doing it. Obviously, they're trying to murder and rape and kill us. But it's going to end up, you can't imagine that they're just interested in raping and pillaging us. Because if they wanted to do that, they could take these children and go out in the forest and do it. But they build these big edifices right in front of us and take our children, and they do it in front of our noses, and they want you to consent. They're trying to destroy your soul, not just take your body. And why are they doing this? Because we're going to find out their entire system and their entire purpose is literally to destroy the teachings of Jesus and get revenge on Jesus by torturing his children, which is you and I. They want to destroy us and take our soul. And they plan on, and they know that there's going to be the last day. And it's all been working up to convincing us with powerful signs and wonders and fearful sights from heaven, false prophets and all of this that they're going to be doing. They're going to try and starve us. And then when we're hungry, they're going to say, if you want to eat, you got to worship the beast. And if you agree to it, I'm telling you, you're going to regret it. Not only in the short term where you're going to be tortured, you're going to watch your children being murdered and raped in front of you, but you're going to lose out and lose your reward. And you will have to be thrown into what the Bible calls this age, or this not eternal flames, but suffering for a certain age where you are going to get the resurrection unto judgment. A rehabilitation, beaten with some few stripes, some with many. But there will be a judgment. Everybody will be judged according to their deeds. You see, we have to be tested because we are human beings. We need to learn what is right from wrong in order to become like God, in order to become divine. We need freedom. We're free agents. We have to make decisions. We can't be forced to do what is good. And when we're young and immature, we make mistakes. We're children. We make mistakes. And so because we make those mistakes, we end up perpetuating the evil until the evil reaches unto heaven and the Father has to look down and start a reset and start it over because our own sins have gotten to the point where it's too much because he won't let us bear any more than we're able. So we're not going to explain the whole reason as to why this is going on, but I want you to understand there is a reason, and they have plans, and that's why you need to know this information. And I want you to know it and believe it because you understand it, not because somebody told you and you like the idea. I want you to see all the history. I want you to know what's going on, what to avoid, what to do. I want to tell you about what really went on from John Dee and Edward Kelly all the way down to the Aleister Crowley and the Parson and the L. Ron Hubbard and the Anton LaVey and the Charles Russell. I want Jehovah's Witnesses to know what their wonderful Charles Taze Russell was and who he was and why he is not a good person. He was bringing these people over. They started Hollywood. He made the first motion picture. He made the first 3 motion picture companies. Pyramid Pictures. Remember, Russell was into pyramids. He's buried on Masonic Way in a Masonic graveyard with a great pyramid with the all-seeing eye surrounded by the laurel wreath that we told you about yesterday, which means he does not believe in Jesus. That's why he taught that Jesus wasn't divine, but just some guy. They are not teaching the plan of salvation. Now, I'm not sure that all of these individuals were all evil. Some of them may have been sincere, but they didn't have the Holy Spirit and they didn't know the truth. And when anybody teaches things that they don't know what they're talking about and they lead people astray, there's going to be a judgment because there's a heavier judgment on those who are teachers. So be very careful. Do not be a teacher unless you understand and know and have the Holy Spirit. And you know for sure that you're teaching people the healthful teachings and the correct way. You don't just get a hair up your, and start, oh, I found out that Jesus isn't true and the Bible's not real. Really? You better make darn sure about that before you go around telling everybody. Because you don't want to end up being a false prophet. Because you know what's going to happen to the false prophets? Joshua of the Sons of God Ministries. Jacoby Jacob. The YouTube guy, Jester was his name. Derek Jester. The professor. The Gnostic warrior. Derek of Myth Vision. Amon Hillman, the Satanist. You guys are going to suffer greatly. Not just during the tribulation, but you're going to lose your eternal reward. And we don't know what will happen to you. It's all written kind of in symbols. We're not sure. Perhaps the Lord will have mercy on your soul and you'll get another chance another 1,000 years from now or something. But you're not ready at this point because you rejected Christ. Not just rejected him because you didn't know, but you stubbornly and willfully went off and fell in your pride and in your arrogance, and you began to blaspheme the Lord and lead astray the children of the Lord. And something has to be done. There's justice in the world, and justice must be met out for the sake of the people or the children of the Lord, for our sake. Without justice, we don't have a kingdom of love. Yes, the Lord is merciful, and I know he'll have mercy on your soul. But be very, very careful about running around telling people there is no Jesus or he's not coming. But anyway, we're at an hour now. I'm going to have to leave it here. And, there's so much more I want to get into. And as I said, there's things that we're going to start talking about, the history of the United States, who the Huguenots were, and the New Franca, and all of the orphan trains, and Benjamin Franklin, and all the history of our country, the Continental Constitution, and why Chicago was built, and who built it, and when, and things like this. Anyway, we're going to let you go. Hope you have a wonderful evening. You know the Lord loves you so very, very much. He loves everybody, including those that in their pride maybe have committed sins, all you got to do is seek the Lord, have your heart humble, and He will accept you. I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you have a wonderful evening. The Lord loves you. His grace and His peace will be with you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.